morning to all of you. Let me first congratulate iForest and its founder, CEO, Chandra Bhushan, for mainstreaming this discussion. There are a number of think tanks all rendering valuable service. But on this subject of energy transition, just energy transition rather, iForest has been on it for the last several years. We had invited Chandra Bhushan to address all the coal executives, I think way back in 2021. A very fine report they had produced on Korba. And it was a revelation that normally when you enumerate or you estimate the impact of a coal mine closure or related to any other fossil activity which may get overtaken by clean energy technology, the impacts are only often considered limited to the formal work staff. His study on Korba was very revealing that actually the usufruct industry around, the transporters, the whole economy in a very large way gets impacted. In fact, they are the ones who are not protected and they need the cover, the protection of the just energy transition. So, very nice that you are continuing this dialogue. I think I was here last year as well. So, and all of you sitting here, I think I must appreciate that this is the august audience which will have to take this dialogue further. I was just thinking, Chandra Bhushan gave a very nice setting to this entire dialogue. And he raised some issues which are very subtle. You see, the topic of this conference does not include the word energy. It's just transition. But at the heart of the just transition lies just energy transition. And we have this report which talks of just finance as well. So I think the issue of energy transition from where it started, and then this word just got prefixed, has been with us for many years, maybe 2 decades, late 90s, early 2000s, when the Rio conferences and all these started. I think the energy transition has now come to be accepted. Energy transition is subtly underway and it must happen. It's happening autonomously, it is happening policy-led, and nobody denies, maybe fossil-rich countries, fossil-consuming countries, they don't deny that energy transition is a must. Call it clean energy transition, clean energy. But the word just, and then the dimension he added by bringing in the US debates, the political debates. Actually, we need to think about it, especially sitting in developing countries. We have, I'm told, delegates from Indonesia, South Africa, fellow developing nations, that the developed countries, which don't have much of a problem of just energy transition, tend to be more worried about fossil and non-fossil than, poorer countries. It's all about money. It's all about the returns, large returns to corporates, to the mega corporations. I mean, the issue of being allowed, of whether they should export more LNG or not, is a part of the election debates in the US. So it's not that there is any alarm on the supply of gas to the American consumer, but they're debating whether they should supply it to the world or not. So, in a way, whether the world will have a just energy transition or not will depend a lot on the developed world as to how they interpret it. And this brings home, for us people who are going to be impacted much closer home, that a taxonomy of these terminologies is a must. Because I was just thinking that whether we talk of a global socio-economic order or a just energy transition, the technology-led, the actors are going to be different, the solutions are going to be different, something is going to happen autonomously. Now, if technology makes solar power cheaper, Mr. Prasad will be out of business on his own. And if you hear from him, they are well prepared. They are doing coal, solar, they are thinking of coal gasification, they are washing coal so that they can get a better market, they can prolong the life of their coal. So it's not the corporates who are going to be worried. So this brings us to the first point which I wanted to make, that the energy transition is already underway. It has been under discussion for the last 20 years. But the other day, like Fatih Birol made a statement to the BBC that the targets for 2030 for clean energy are going to be outstripped by a factor of maybe 2 or 3, because he says it is cheaper for countries like us. It diversifies our energy portfolio. I remember almost 10 years back in 2015 or 16, when Australia was heading the G20. So I was there in that discussion, and they were discussing whether the developing country will adopt renewable, or will it only be something which the developed countries will do. I had mentioned that time that for us there is no option, because we are undersupplied with energy. We need to develop all sources of energy. And that thing still remains alive with us. We will continue to produce coal and consume it because we must supply our people with energy. So the fact that energy transition is already upon us is well recognized, but the just energy transition aspects are still being debated. So this brings me to the second point, that we should not land up in a situation where we start achieving net zero earlier by 2040, 2050, but the just transition has not happened. Now, Mr. Prasad will have migrated. Coal India, I mention him because he's the world's largest coal producer, Coal India Limited. They will have migrated to clean energy. They're thinking of doing pump storages. Now, coal mining leads to formation of large pits, huge pits. So he's thinking of doing pump storage in them. He may even develop golf courses there. And he has a lot of land. He may urbanize, he may offer those lands. You see, the coal producing areas have very good industrial infrastructure. They have huge railway network. They have a huge labor force. The power plants are also on site. Many of the large super thermal power plants are located in the coal mine. So there is energy, there is land, there is workforce, and they produce a lot of water, because when you dig and disturb the water table, they produce a lot of water. So these regions, the corporates will have no problem. But the large workforce which is engaged in coal mining, cleaning, transporting, and the communities around it, they will be left high and dry. So the second point which I wanted to make was that a transition to clean energy tends to be less energy intensive. In fact, that is the reason why things are cheaper. Why is solar cheaper? It's basically only cost of financing. There's no raw material used. Now, even the other forms of the transition, let's say in the transport sector, when you move to, let's say, more efficient forms of transportation like mass rapid transits or RRTSs, then there's the small auto rickshaw wala and the small taxi walas, etc. They go out of business. I mean, I'm not supporting them. We must have efficient transportation in the cities. But then with that, the employments are going to be impacted. So a just energy transition, which is actually a much bigger topic than mere supply of energy, supply of clean energy, employment, it's a whole lot of things. And iForest itself and many people have developed a lot of body of knowledge on these aspects. So this is the second thing which I wanted to mention, that the institutional preparedness, the socio-economic well-being, which Chandra Bhushan mentioned in his speech, are still works in progress. And these are problems of developing countries. The solutions have to be found by us. So this is something which needs to be debated, and this needs to be sorted out. And final point which I wanted to make, that this preparation of the economy of the society to move to a just transitional, just order, coming from a regulatory body that I do, I notice that globally now, the energy regulators, the infrastructure regulators, be it even the SEBIs of the day of those countries, they are all now incorporating, inducting environmental goals into their activity. So this is something which we in India and maybe in the developing countries also need to think. In the oil and gas sector, the PNGRB is there. In the electricity sector, CRC is there. Let's say in the ports, there is TAMPI. Then there are the TRIs, the internet handlers. So maybe it's about time that we need to identify a new role, revisit the charter of these institutions while we develop the markets, while we do consumer protection, while we promote competitive markets. We also need to make sure that all this happens in a competitive, in an environmentally sustainable manner. If we bring in a very vibrant fossil market, but it is dirty, then there's no point. So this is something which may be a food for thought for iForest and for others, that I do read that globally this is happening. But in India, where the acts have been made and regulators and the government often have a frosty relationship, it will be important that it is laid down, and developing a new institution to usher in just energy transition and all the other challenges which have been identified earlier in many of our debates. What will be the institutional mechanism to usher in energy transition? So these institutions which have been created through acts of parliament are already there, and they could perhaps also be tasked to do this. So these are my thoughts for the day. I saw a very impressive lineup of speakers, and the North debate, the South debate, and then putting them all together. In the closure, you have some very high quality VIPs who have done lots of work in these areas and are well renowned. So my best wishes, CB, to you and to the audience. Thank you.